What does a community need to thrive? What are the features of a place that enable people to live their lives, to go to work, to raise a family, to engage with others? Underlying these daily activities is the backbone that makes a thriving community possible: public infrastructure. The water coming out of the tap, the sewer that carries our waste, the electricity that lights our homes, the network of roads, sidewalks, and trains that connect us to each other. Almost everything we do relies on infrastructure, which is why, in many places throughout the world, infrastructure is seen as a public good. But the public sector constantly struggles to pay for these essential, yet often expensive features of everyday life. Many communities lack basic infrastructure, and others face a backlog of repairs. Experts project that governments around the world will need to invest more than $50 trillion in infrastructure by 2030. Where can the public turn to pay for this? Land value capture, also known as land value return, is an approach governments can use to finance expensive infrastructure projects and other public services without drawing from their general budget. Instead, they can initiate public actions that help to pay for them. You see, some kinds of public actions, like infrastructure investment or land use changes, can directly cause an increase in the value of land in a specific area. Typically, those increases in wealth go directly into the pockets of a few lucky landowners. This is inherently unfair, because collective decisions and sometimes public money are directly creating an unearned windfall for a small number of people. And in a time of tight budgets and exploding need for public services, these windfalls to private landowners represent an enormous missed opportunity. Imagine if even a fraction of the land values generated by these public actions could be recovered and reinvested in a way that benefits everyone. This is where land value capture comes in. The principle behind land value capture is that public action should generate public benefit. By utilizing different land value capture strategies, governments can trigger increases in land values and funnel that wealth into the public services that enable their communities to thrive. Okay, let's break this down. To use land value capture, a government first has to initiate an action that will increase land values. The two main kinds of public actions a government can take to do this are investments in infrastructure and land use changes. How do these actions influence land values? Let's look at infrastructure investments first. When you think about it, infrastructure has a lot to do with how desirable a location is to live, work, and run a business. And location is what matters most in the real estate market, determining the value of land. Just imagine this same building in a place with no public infrastructure at all. Who would want to live there? It would be practically worthless. The impact of public investments in infrastructure on land values adds up to a lot of money. Researchers have been able to measure this around specific projects. One study looked at the construction of a mass transit line in Manila, the Philippines, an important metro line in the city which was completed in the year 2000 and cost the city $655 million to build. Researchers looked at the value of land within a kilometer of each stop on the new subway line and compared it to the value of land more than 2 kilometers away from the stations. By tracking real estate prices in these two groups over time, before, during, and after construction, they were able to see that the land close to the new transit stations increased in value far more than the land further away. The researchers estimated that in total, the land within 1 kilometer of the transit stations gained close to $3.4 billion in value as a direct result of the MRT3 line. Did you catch that? The increased value of property generated by the new subway line was roughly 5 times the cost of the project. Manila is not an isolated case. The 2017 Q Line extension in New York City generated $7.1 billion in land value, compared with a construction cost of $4.5 billion. In the San Francisco Bay Area, the new Warm Springs South Fremont Station created $2.8 billion in land value, compared with an $802 million construction cost. And it's not just transit. Similar effects can be found with projects like the rehabilitation of a stream, flood control, and revitalization of public spaces. These are all examples of how infrastructure investments increase land values. The other way governments can trigger increases in land values are through certain changes in land use regulations. One of the most common ways this happens is when the government changes the zoning to allow more dense development. As populations grow, it's common for governments to allow bigger, taller buildings in more places. If the land is adequately serviced and demand is high, changing the zoning to allow new development can make the land in those places more valuable. This is because developers can profit from building larger buildings and selling more units. These kinds of zoning changes can generate a lot of money. For example, the municipality of Valledupar, Colombia, regulates land use by designating some land as rural, which is reserved for open space and farmland, and other land as urban, which allows for more density. When the government rezoned a plot of land at the periphery of the city from rural to urban to enable a new development project, the effective value of the parcel increased by the equivalent of $42 million in US dollars, more than 5.5 times the value it was before, just because the government changed the zoning. Valledupar is not an outlier. In fact, in cities throughout the world, urban analysts have found that such rezonings can generate an appreciation in land value of up to 600%, depending on local market conditions. In all these examples, public action, which could be infrastructure investments or land use changes, triggered an increase in land values. But who ultimately benefited from those actions? The folks who owned the land, whose own efforts had nothing to do with their newfound wealth. What if even a portion of those government-generated increases in wealth were redirected back into the community to pay for things that benefit everyone? Within the Land Value Capture Toolkit, there are lots of options governments can utilize to help fulfill the unique needs and challenges of their communities. Different versions of land value capture have been used in cities all over the world. Take Manizales, Colombia, which has a mountainous topography, making it difficult and expensive, but very necessary to build roads. The city knew that building the roads would increase the accessibility and safety of private land along the new roads, and thus would increase the value of that land. So they decided to use a land value capture instrument called Betterment contributions. Betterment contributions are a fee paid by landowners in a designated area who would benefit from an infrastructure project. In Manizales, the fee was calculated by taking into account the cost of the new roads, the value added to the properties by the project, and the capacity of the landowners to pay. Through Betterment contributions, Manizales raised $24.6 million in US dollars for the roads and other urban revitalization projects. Betterment contributions are used widely in Colombia, and survey data shows high levels of satisfaction among property owners and residents in Manizales. Just like Manizales was able to recover and reinvest the value add of their infrastructure investments through Betterment contributions, the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts has been able to recover the value add of land use changes to reinvest in affordable housing. This instrument is called Inclusionary Housing. Cambridge, Massachusetts is home to elite universities and a flourishing tech and biomedical industry. It's also one of the most expensive places to live in the United States. The city needed more affordable housing, and they knew that increasing the allowable density would make land more valuable. So they decided to use a land value capture tool called Inclusionary Housing. Under the City of Cambridge's Inclusionary Housing program, developers are allowed to build larger residential buildings only if 20% of the floor area is dedicated to affordable housing. Cambridge's affordable housing law has created more than 1,000 units of affordable rental and ownership housing in new developments throughout the city. These affordable homes provide a crucial housing opportunity for many residents in the community. And developers are willing to pay for them because the value created by the zoning changes more than makes up for the cost of providing the affordable units. Betterment contributions in Manizales, Colombia, and Inclusionary Housing in Cambridge, Massachusetts are just two examples from a wealth of experiences with land value capture across the world. The Land Value Capture Toolbox is full of options, each with its own context, advantages, and considerations. Land readjustment in Tokyo, Japan, the selling of development rights in Sao Paulo, Brazil, exactions in Cordoba, Argentina, transfer of development rights in Pennsylvania, the US. These instruments and more play a crucial role in helping governments throughout the world finance the needs of their communities. Are infrastructure investments and land use changes happening in your neighborhood? If so, how might the Land Value Capture Toolbox help your community pay for the public goods and services you rely on?